All right. 3, 2, 1. What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the Evidence-Based Excellence podcast with your host on episode 37, Mr. George Cresswell, as always, your friendly neighborhood far-right thug in Starmer's occupied Britain. Yep, let's get straight into it. So if you're wondering why I'm wearing the exact same shirt from last time, it's because I'm literally recording this podcast straight after the one that you may or may not have listened to, episode 36, where I talked about, but basically the title will sort of, if I don't change the title, will give you an indication as to what we sort of talked about, and it ties into episode 34, which is the success despite adversity, or the succeed despite adversity episode, and that is the keep moving forward. Despite adversity, despite the challenge, despite the roadblocks and the, things that life gives you to trip you up, the obstacles that you must overcome, surmount and overcome, you keep moving forward. You keep always moving forward because that is the only way that you succeed. Well, we're going to sort of take a little bit of a different perspective on that idea. I was reminded of a quote that I read a fairly long time ago, regarding the topic of, it can extend to anything, but like personal success or personal development, okay? And it was the following quote, and it was, "You don't win a game of chess by only moving forwards." Now, that will sort of contrast a little bit about what we talked about last time, where it was always keep working forwards or keep moving forwards. But it's important to know that you can move forwards in a variety of ways. Sometimes the thing that you need to do to move forward isn't the thing that feels that it should be in the short term. It's something you need to do for the long term. The gym is an easy example, especially if you go very frequently. And I will say this straight away, guys. I do apologize. I've got my phone hooked into my laptop, so it's charging. It's very, very low battery. My other camera's playing up massively for some reason. So if my phone does die, apologies. This might just be an audio-only episode, but, it is what it is. At the end of the day, it is what it is. More important that I get these out to you more than anything. But sometimes the things that you need to do to move yourself forward in the long run are not necessarily the things that you feel you need to do in the short term, okay? The gym is a great example because if you listened to my stress plus rest equals growth episode, which I recorded a fairly long time ago, then you know that in order to progress in the gym, it's not just the workouts that you need, okay? Yes, you need to promote stimulus. Let's just say it's muscle hypertrophy, right? Yes, you need to promote stimulus for growth. You need to provide that through your training. Yes, absolutely. But then what about the other factors that lie on the other side of that, hypertrophic process, namely the ones associated with recovery and the ones that take place during the recovery aspect, okay? Because chronic overtraining and overtraining is definitely a thing, and it leads to significant maladaptation. You have stories. I remember one of my professors in university was telling me about athletes that he worked with that were chronically overtrained. And he was saying a lot of times they struggled to even just get themselves out of bed. It reminds me of professional wrestlers in the WWE, for example, or the guys who take bumps day in, day out, and they end up in their 30s even with chronic back pain and addicted to prescription painkillers and all the rest of it. Too much of the stress, the thing that's causing damage, the thing that's breaking you down, is only going to succeed in breaking you down if you don't give yourself then time in the interim to recover so that you can attack it again when you are fresh, when you are fully recovered, and when you are slightly adapted. You need the recovery phase in order to adapt. This goes back to the model of Hans Selye, where he coined his general theory of adaptation, or general adaptation syndrome. Okay, and I'll see if I can flash the graph up for it, but what the basic outline of it. And it's basically you start off with a baseline, okay, then you have a stimulus, which temporarily takes you, believe it or not, below that baseline. So you imagine you have let's just say you have a really tough chest workout, okay, or push workout, okay. Your chest, your triceps, your front and medial delts, they are absolutely fragged, okay. They are knackered. And after that, in the days after that, you typically have, the days where you have your muscle soreness. And if you do legs, for example, you struggle sitting down at your desk and on the toilet and all stuff like that, right? You have that muscle soreness, you have that fibrosis, you have that reduced range of motion, that increased pain sensation. Well, that is a decrease in performance. Across that time, that is a decrease in performance. You're not going to be as strong. Your legs are far more tender. You can't go as far in terms of range of motion because in order for the muscle to repair itself, it can't undergo those same stressful motions that created the damage in the first place. So therefore, it stiffens up. That's what fibrosis is, by the way, when it stiffens up, okay, in order for the repairs and the growth to take place. Now, if you take the keep moving forward purely literally, you think that every single day you have to train chest and do your 1 rep max every single day and, go to failure every single set, 30 sets a day. And it's like, no, you don't need to do that. Most of you doing that, something anywhere close to that, you're going to absolutely die off. Your upper body and your general life as a whole is going to die a death, okay? And that would be a case where you can't lift yourself from bed and you're going to be horrendously sore and, everything about your life is going to fall apart. You start doing stuff like that. But that's why it's important to look at the other side of the spectrum as well. Because a lot of people do get into that frame of mind. I get into it a lot sometimes where I need to be doing more, I need to be doing more, I need to be doing more. And a lot of the time, that is the answer. Okay, let's face it, a lot of the time that is the answer. Humans are prone to being lazy. Make no mistake about it. We're quite prone to that. And a lot of times the answer for us is more. Okay? But then sometimes when we're on the opposite side of things, we need to be able to say sometimes, no, I need a day off today. Or, I need to not worry about this thing today. I think my phone may have just died. I will be back, guys. I am just going to double check. I think my phone may have died. I was correct. My phone did die. So this is going to be an audio episode. Oh, well, it's my first episode where it is not a video, or I might just input some fucking stock image of me. Might just input the thumbnail as a what is it? 10, 15 minute, however long this episode is, as a thing. Well, I'll try and include the video that was in at the start, and then when the video cuts off, I know that happened with one of Lex Friedman's podcast once with Magnus Carlsen, so I just don't have to look at the camera anymore. He's like, I just look wherever I want and not have to worry about that other bastard camera going in and out of focus or whatever. But that's a bit gutting. That's a bit gutting. Oh well, there you go. I completely lost where I was. But yeah, going back to that other side of the equation, guys. So sometimes, yes, we do need to do more. We need to push harder. We need to push further to promote adaptation. We need to force it sometimes. But you have to take into account with everything that you force, you need to then give yourself that time to recover, to recuperate. Otherwise, you won't get the benefit out of the stimulus that you're putting in. Okay, these are not independent variables. They are dependent variables. And for example, your level of fatigue, your level of residual fatigue, if you're not fully recovered after a session or after a particularly hard mesocycle, for example, that's going to affect the next session that you do. Okay, similarly, I said, if you're going really, really hard in the gym and you spike yourself right down below your baseline, you go so hard. And maybe this is what you're doing. You're going through a planned overreaching phase and you're trying to get that super compensation ready for when you compete at a certain event on a certain day or whatever. Okay, there's different periodization strategies, but for the most part with people, they're just going to be turning up to the gym semi-regularly and training maybe each muscle group twice a week, maybe 3 times per week. And, getting somewhere between, on average, probably about 10 to 20 sets per muscle group per week. If you're unadapted completely, you're going to get strong doing basically nothing, or, just lifting a broom, as Ross usually would say. But important to remember then is you do have that other side of the coin. The greater the stimulus, the greater fatigue. Okay. And sometimes the stimulus very rarely will fully outweigh the fatigue. So this is something called the stimulus to fatigue ratio. Okay, with every bit of stimulus that you put in, you generate a proportional amount of fatigue. Okay, and what happens is as you get longer and longer into a workout, or as you start ramping up, say, training volumes more and more and more, eventually you start generating disproportionately more fatigue. And that's where you start getting into the realms of what we call junk volume in training, okay, where the volume is not good quality volume that's going to promote muscle growth or anything, or strength, for example. It's just, the straggling sets that are on the end of the workout that you always devote to posterior deltoids, and that's why they never grow, for example. Because mentally you're checked out the gym, physically your body's checked out, and all you're doing at this point is you're providing no stimulus for growth because you've already exceeded the maximum cap that your body can tolerate. And everything above this is just generating more and more fatigue that before your body can even adapt from the training session, it needs to get rid of this fatigue anyway. So you have to be very, very careful in this regard. And that's why you have to be very, very careful with this keep moving forward, is that it's not always more. A lot of the time it may be, but it's not always more. It's not always that it means more. As I said, sometimes it means you've got to take a day off. Sometimes it means, you have to go away and do something to de-stress. Sometimes it might mean you have to take a few days off, okay? Especially if you're, on a really stressful work trip or something like that, for example, okay? I know a lot of people, they train when they go away and all stuff like that. They keep it going. And that's all well and good. But it's important to consistently take note, especially if you actually care about your progress in the gym, for example. It's important to be continually assessing yourself. How recovered do you feel? How stimulated did you feel that workout was? How much did you feel the exercise in the target muscle you were supposed to be feeling it in? How well are you progressing the weights maybe a day or two after? How sore do you feel? How much difficulty do you have moving? How generally systemically fatigued do you feel? And you know that because if you have a super hard, heavy lifting squat session, for example, that tests you to the very depths of your soul, you're going to be a completely different person for a couple of days afterwards, most probably, if you went really, really hard with it. Because even your nervous system is going to get fatigued by that point. And, that can just affect your general mood and your overall energy levels. And then combine that with anything offset with your nutrition, your sleep, that all plays a massive, massive role. But the main thing is I want to draw you back to that quote, which I talked about at the start. Is that it's a very, very nice parallel sometimes between something as seemingly, static and unphysically demanding as chess, which obviously is a very mentally demanding game. And there is an endurance component to chess. Let's make no mistake. Some of these players, they play fucking, games that are many hours long, And sometimes the games span like several days. Look at the sagas with Gary Kasparov versus Anatoly Karpov, for example. The sagas and the games that they had and how long they went on. And that's not even talking about the whole politics situation and everything like that. But biggest thing is that sometimes you move a piece into a position, a piece that can move backwards. So that can either be your knight, your bishop, your queen, king, or your rook. Obviously, all of those pieces that are not pawns can move forwards as well as backwards. It's only pawns that cannot move backwards. Sometimes you need to move those pieces back in order to generate opportunities for maybe other pieces to come through. You need to move those things into better attacking positions from the one they were in, or you need to move them back into defensive positions so that when you try to initiate an attack, you're not leaving yourself open for certain counterattacks and all stuff like that. That all contributes to you winning the game. Okay, now I'm not a chess grandmaster by any means. I'm simplifying it for the point of illustration. I'm not going to go through end games of, queen to e5 or whatever the hell it may be. I'm not anywhere near skilled enough to do that. I could probably just about beat a child at chess, okay? And that's like the average child, the kind of child that if you offered them $10,000 or £10,000 2 hours from now and 2 Oreos, that they would take the 2 Oreos right now. That kind of child, okay? My intellectual knowledge of chess is not very, not high necessarily by any means. Watch a lot of videos on chess because I find it interesting, but sometimes you got to move pieces back. If you moved a piece into a very strong or very forward attacking position, sometimes your opponents will initiate certain defensive actions that force you to bring that piece back. Okay, sometimes let's just say the bishop moves up and then the pawn moves up to a taking position, but that pawn is covered by another pawn. Well, it doesn't make sense to take the pawn, maybe, depending on what the strategy is, unless you've calculated 20 moves in your head of why this trade makes sense. But if you trade that bishop for the pawn, well, you're a bishop down, but they're only a pawn down. That's a loss. That's a loss trade. Make no mistake about it, for the most part. So unless you've made a calculated sacrifice in that scenario because you're like Magnus Carlsen and or Hikaru Nakamura, and just like you do whatever the fuck you want, you bomb cloud your way to victory, whatever the hell it may be. Okay, but that's an example where not moving forward is the way that you move forward ultimately. Because then, for example, you may still have that bishop later on in the game, and all of a sudden that bishop plays a vital role in either you negating defeat or attaining victory. Okay, and it doesn't have to be the bishop. It can be the rook. It can be the king. It can be the knight. It can be a single pawn that, because you protected it, and now it's a pass pawn, that now obviously you get it to the back and you can promote to whatever the hell you want. Okay, but oftentimes you find yourself moving pieces back and forwards and back and forwards and back and forwards, and you keep going and side to side, obviously. So it's not always forward that's the way to go to keep you moving forward. Okay, now go back to that Battle of Britain example I talked about last time. It wasn't just the planes in the air that they were targeting. We had bombers going over Germany and dropping bombs on their manufacturing plants for their Luftwaffe and all the rest of it. So we were attacking them in more than one way. We weren't just on the defensive. We were launching these attacking strikes. And obviously the whole World War II dilemma is a thing in and of itself. It was absolutely disgusting, some of the things that went on. War is disgusting. Let's make no mistake about it. War is disgusting. But, we attacked them in multitudes of ways. We didn't just attack the planes in the air and the troops on the ground. We sent bombers over. We attacked munitions factories. We attacked manufacturers of maybe automobiles and tanks and aircraft. Everything we did to cripple them so that we could cripple them, so that our defenses held, so that we were then able to go on the attack. And then that made it so much easier when we went on the attack later on in the war, and obviously subsequently won it. So obviously then when Italy fell, for example, obviously there was internal strife and Mussolini was kicked out and all stuff like that. So there's other things at play as well. But I'd argue that not only did we keep moving forward in the metaphorical sense. But a lot of those things we, sometimes had to take steps back. We had to do blackouts, for example, so that they couldn't see their targets. That's obviously an inconvenience to people. Bomb shelters and all the rest of it. Food rationing, Sometimes you have to move backwards in order to move forwards, and sometimes you've got to move backwards again. And going back to that Hans Selye example, think about when you're training, you're actually moving backwards. Okay, this is an interesting way to think about it. I want you to have this little thought experiment, okay? When you're training, in a way, you're moving backwards, because as I said, you're dipping below your baseline at this point. You're hammering yourself in the gym, and you dip below your baseline afterwards. Well, what happens then is you return to baseline after a period of time. Typically, depending on the intensity of the training session or the intensity of the stimulus and how much fatigue was generated, typically this will probably be around 3 to 4 days, okay? After 4 days, that's when the majority, if anything, of the muscle soreness is probably gone. You might still be like a little bit stiff, but you're most of the way recovered by that point. If it was a pretty intense session, if you took yourself all the way to the depths of your soul, maybe it'll take you, a little bit longer, but somewhere around that time, okay? But either way, it goes down, and I'm doing the hand gestures right now, but my camera's not even on. It goes down below the baseline and comes back up to the baseline, but it doesn't just come back up to the baseline. Goes a little bit over, okay? And that's because you don't just recover, you adapt as well, okay? Human body is a very, very adaptable machine. You need to remember that. The human body is a very, very adaptable organism, and it will adapt under the stimulus that you place on it. Okay, different people adapt at different rates and to different magnitudes, but it will adapt. Your body will adapt if you put the stimulus on it and if you give it the necessary recovery. Now, that's in form of nutrition, that's in form of sleep, that's in form of time, everything, okay? So it takes a little bit above the baseline, and that's your new baseline. Now, if you just allow yourself not to train again, gradually you'll fall back to your old baseline, okay? You will fall back to your old baseline, okay? That's atrophy, that's detraining. You will fall back to your baseline. And I say atrophy, you won't gain any appreciable muscle just from one training session. Okay, make no mistake about it. You won't gain any appreciable muscle just from one training session, but detraining, you'll bring yourself back down to your baseline. However, if you then give yourself time to fully recover, you hit your baseline, you go slightly above it, and then you hit another training stimulus. That brings you back down, possibly even below your old baseline. Okay? But then you recover back to your baseline that you just come down from, so that's the slightly elevated baseline, and guess what? It slightly elevates above that again, and you drop down, you go up, you drop down, you go up, and that's why they say progress is never linear, okay? This is a perfect illustration of why progress is never linear, because you need to have these dips and these troughs and these peaks in order to make the progress over time. What's going to happen is your average is going to increase over time. Your average muscle mass, your average bench press strength, your average leg press and squat strength, whatever it may be. Okay, it doesn't matter necessarily what it is. Everything will increase over time. Those averages will increase, and that's what gives you your long-term progress then. Now, over periods of detraining, obviously your baseline will gradually shift back down. But what happens is if you never allow yourself to fully recover and you hit another training bout or another stimulus when you're not ready, well, what's going to happen is you're going to get to the bottom of that initial decrease off your first baseline or off whatever baseline it is, and you hit it again, well, it's just going to drop down again. And then it's going to drop down to a baseline that's even lower. And that's what I'm saying. That's what I said before. You've got to be careful with the fatigue that you accrue, because now in order to get back to your old baseline, you've got to recover even further because the dip is so much greater. Now, you can save it at this point. You can really save it at any point, but the further you let this go on, the more drastic the action you have to take in order to solve the problem. Okay? But let's say you have 2 sessions, you hit the second session when you're not fully recovered, but then you let yourself recover back to baseline. Well, it took the body a lot longer and it was a lot harder for it to recover back to its original baseline. So your response isn't going to be that great from it. Okay? You might just get back to baseline, you might get a little bit above it, you might not get above that baseline at all. Now, this is not going into the planned overreaching and supercompensation phase, but what happens is if this is allowed to continue, so you hit your first training session, the bar, you go your original baseline and it drops down. When it's, in that peak, before you get back to your original baseline, you hit it again and it drops down further. Now, before it recovers to the point where it dropped down from this time, you hit it again and it drops down, and you keep dropping it down. You know, if you're a professional athlete, for example, this is liable to happen because you're doing, you know, a lot of high intensity training every day. Well, eventually you get to the point then when you're chronically overtraining because you're so far below your original baseline and you're going down and down and down. And that is maladaptation. That is, or maladaptation is what we call that. It's bad. It means you're regressing. You're going the opposite way. And obviously that's not what we want. And it's because you're not allowing for sufficient recovery to take place. Think of it in chess, you're making all of these bad trades. And now when you get into the end game, your opponent, you may have a king, a knight, and 3 pawns, while your opponent's got, you know, because he didn't make all these silly trades, your opponent might have 2 pawns, but he's got his bishop and he's got his rook and all these other things. Doesn't matter. He's a queen up or whatever because he didn't make all these silly trades trying to go forward, just trying to threaten the king, and he wasn't playing strategically. Or he left himself open for checkmate or whatever and check threats, and he's got to deal with that. But he didn't make all of these stupid decisions, or the guy that made all of these stupid decisions at the chessboard is now paying for it later on. Similarly, like the guy or the athlete or whoever it may be didn't allow himself sufficient recovery, and now he's paying for all those extra sessions that he done later on. Now, a little bit different in athletics or a little bit different in physical training is obviously if you've planned this, you can have the super compensation. You get the super compensation phase where you get this massive performance increase after you allow a massive deload for to get that recovery boost, rather, so that you go down and down and down and down and down and down. It's almost like you're banking workouts in a way. You're banking workouts for a short period of time. And you're running down your clock, so to speak, if you will. You're running down your body, but then you have this massive recovery phase. And what the theory is, what should happen is you go far down below your baseline, but then you have this recovery phase and you shoot back up and you go sailing above the previous baseline after this recovery phase. And unspecified, depends on the demands, depends on what stimulus has been placed on the athlete over what period of time. But then the idea is you get this massive boost in performance at a specific acute point in time. Okay, now that's something for you to go over with a professional coach, depending on what your competition schedule looks like, for example. But outside of that, you just bring yourself down and down and down, and you end up paying for it. You end up paying for it when you can't get out of bed. You end up paying for it when you can't, your performance is drastically down. Your quality of life goes down, your testosterone's down, all the rest of it. So don't do that. Understand that in order to move forward, you don't always physically move forward. It's not a Dark Souls game where you constantly head into the wall until it breaks. Okay, you got a really hard boss and you're trying to crack it, and you keep throwing your head into it over and over and over again. You keep getting your ass kicked. You get a 1 hit from death, and then it kills you with a stupid AoE or whatever it is. Sometimes you need to take a step back, go into the open world, maybe get some more experience to get some more health and resilience and maybe dexterity or strength, okay, or faith, depending on what your build is. Yes, I'm a nerdy gamer as well. And, when you come back then and you've upgraded your character, then you may have a greater chance of defeating the boss. Or you go out into the open world and you find a particular weapon that's better than your own by far, or you find a particular spell or some form of resin that you can put on your weapon that the boss is weak to, so that you end up doing double or triple damage. And obviously then that's going to make your chances of success a lot harder. But sometimes it is just quite fun and cathartic to crack your head into a wall a couple of times. At least in the gaming sense, okay? Don't go doing that for real, and don't go doing that in your workouts. But yeah, that's about 10 minutes longer than I anticipated I was going to be talking for. But yeah, that's another episode done. So apologies about the video, guys. I do apologize. Hopefully there'll be some nice stock images or something on the screen view if you're watching this. But yeah, just understand that you don't always need to physically move forward or do more in order to progress. Sometimes less is more. Sometimes more is more, but sometimes less is more. Wisdom. Sometimes less is more, sometimes more is more. But yeah, have fun, guys. It's been a pleasure talking to you again. Hope you enjoyed it. And wherever you are, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. Have an amazing day. Get to the gym, make some gains. And I will catch you very, very soon. Godspeed.